Why was everyone laughing at her? The night air over Fort Campbell was sharp enough to sting the lungs, every breath a mix of cold and dust and pride. Floodlights cut pale lines across the obstacle course, turning sweat into silver streaks on every soldier's face, except one. Harper Mitchell hung halfway up the rope, her boots scraping uselessly against the fibers, her left arm trembling violently. "Dead weight, that's all you are, Mitchell." Colonel James Reed's voice sliced through the dark like a knife. He stood with his arms folded, the silhouette of authority, tall, broad, immovable. Around him, 20 SEAL operators watched, night vision goggles glowing like predator eyes. Sergeant Morrison laughed first. "Look at her, shaking like a leaf." Another voice followed, meaner. "Bet she can't do 5 push-ups without crying for mommy." The laughter spread, contagious, ugly. Harper's fingers were white on the rope, the tremor in her left arm deepening. Every inch of progress she made seemed to feed their amusement. Her breath came hard, visible clouds in the 40-degree air. "Get down, Mitchell," Colonel Reed barked. "You're embarrassing yourself and wasting our time." She didn't answer. Her body shook with exhaustion, pain biting down on every muscle. But behind the fatigue something else stirred, a focus born from humiliation too long endured. "Sir," she whispered, her voice nearly lost in the wind, "I can." "You can what?" Reed snapped. "Slow us down, get someone killed." The men laughed again, but none of them noticed the way her breathing changed, steadying, quieting. The trembling in her arm lessened. Then her grip slipped. She hit the ground hard. The thud echoed across the field, followed by a chorus of laughter. Dust rose, catching in the floodlights like smoke. Someone's phone camera clicked, someone else jeered. Only one person didn't join in. Private Elena Rodriguez, the youngest member of the support staff, stood near the edge of the formation, her face drawn tight. Something about the scene felt wrong. Harper wasn't just a weak trainee. There was a deliberateness in the way she moved, slow, measured, purposeful. When Harper stood, she didn't look at anyone. She brushed the dirt off her uniform, faded BDUs with threadbare knees and worn-down elbows, and adjusted her stance. Feet shoulder-width apart, weight balanced, center low, a fighter's stance. But the others didn't see that. Morrison swaggered forward, puffed up with easy confidence. "Why don't you head back to supply where you belong? That's a safe space for the weak." The laughter came again, feeding off itself. Harper said nothing. Her fingers brushed her left sleeve, an unconscious movement pressing against something beneath the fabric. Pain flickered briefly in her eyes, quickly buried. "Enough," Reed barked. "Full squad moved to the night fire range. Live fire drills. Mitchell, you'll follow behind. Try not to trip over your own feet." The squad moved like shadows, silent, fluid, perfectly trained. Harper followed a few paces back, her gait uneven, favoring her right side. Lance Corporal Torres fell behind to block her path. "Hey, dead weight," he sneered. "You made us 10 minutes late already. Why don't you just quit, save us the trouble?" Harper checked her watch, a scratched old military timepiece, the kind that carried stories. She noted the time, said nothing, and stepped around him. Elena quickened her pace to join her. "Don't let them get to you," she whispered. "It's fine," Harper murmured. Her hands adjusted the magazines on her vest with mechanical precision. Each movement was efficient, practiced. The layout, angled for ambidextrous reloads, was textbook special operations style, but no one noticed. Behind the squad, Master Chief Williams watched her closely. The veteran NCO had seen thousands of soldiers in his career, but something about Mitchell didn't fit. The way she checked corners, the way her eyes swept the darkness, mapping terrain automatically. That wasn't training, that was habit. The others kept mocking. "I heard she couldn't even qualify on the M9, one said. "Had to retake it with her eyes closed," another added. Reed chuckled. "I'll put $1,000 on it, she can't hit a single target tonight." The men laughed again. The cruelty was easy when you didn't see the cost. Reed turned toward Harper. You hear that, Mitchell? 3 out of 5 hits at 400 meters. Miss and you're gone, no second chances. Harper adjusted the compression wrap beneath her sleeve. It wasn't standard issue. It was medical grade, the kind developed for astronauts to regulate nerve pressure. Beneath it, damaged tissue still burned where shrapnel had once torn through flesh and bone. She said nothing. The group arrived at the firing range, a stretch of open darkness lit only by scattered range lights. Automated targets lined the tree line, barely visible. The bets began immediately. I say she doesn't even shoulder the rifle, Jackson laughed, slapping cash onto an ammo crate. Mitchell, Reed ordered, 5 rounds 400 meters, 3 hits or you're done. She stepped to the rack. Her fingers brushed along the rifles, light, quick, practiced. She picked up an M4 carbine, checked the chamber, adjusted the sight, and tested the trigger pull, all in one smooth sequence. Morrison smirked. Look at her pretending she knows what she's doing. Alina's stomach twisted. She wanted to say something to stop this circus, but she knew how the military worked. Rank, hierarchy, silence. Harper lowered herself into prone position. The tremor in her left arm returned immediately. The barrel wavered. Morrison laughed aloud. 2 minutes, Mitchell, Reed called, checking his watch. Make them count. The first shot cracked through the night. Missed 2 meters right, the spotter called. The laughter was instant. Reed shook his head. 4 left, stop wasting ammunition. Harper shifted. Slowly, deliberately, she rolled up her left sleeve. The motion was casual, but when the fabric slid past her elbow, Williams froze. There it was. A coiled viper tattoo wrapped around the number 17, ink faded with time. Beneath it, a jagged scar ran from wrist to elbow, raw, pink, unmistakable. Williams took an involuntary step back. Reed didn't notice. See, this is why women don't belong in. The second shot cut him off. Hit center mass. Silence. The laughter stopped cold. Harper adjusted her position minutely. Third shot fired. Hit same hole. Even the spotter's voice wavered. 20 men, elite operators, the best of the best, stood frozen as the woman they mocked tore their arrogance apart with calm precision. Williams leaned toward Reed, his voice low. Sir, look at her arm. What are you? Reed turned mid-sentence and stopped. His eyes found the tattoo, the scar, his face drained of color. No, he whispered, that's impossible. Fourth shot. Hit. Reed stared at the emblem, recognition dawning like a ghost rising from memory. His breath caught, and for a heartbeat the world shrank to the sound of that rifle, the scent of gunpowder, and the memory of a convoy burning in a far-off desert. He remembered being trapped beneath twisted metal, the suffocating heat, the voice on the radio, steady, calm, female. Phantom Actual, I've got you, just hold on. The fifth shot came. Hit 5 for 5, the spotter breathed, 2-inch group. The silence that followed wasn't just shock, it was shame, awe, revelation. Harper stood slowly, rolled down her sleeve and safetied the rifle. She returned it to the rack without a word. Behind her, Reed whispered what everyone else was thinking. Phantom. At first only Williams heard him, then louder, your phantom. The word rippled through the group like a tremor. The legendary name whispered in Black Ops circles. The ghost soldier from a unit that never officially existed. Ghost Unit 17. 12 operators, all killed in action, no survivors. Except one. The woman they just called dead weight. Williams' voice was hoarse. Ghost 17, Operation Hellfire, Kandahar, August 15, 2019. You pulled 6 men from a kill zone under fire. They said you were dead. Reed's knees nearly gave out. He remembered the heat, the blast, the small hands dragging him from the Humvee. the same hands that now held an M4 steady as a heartbeat. Harper didn't turn around. "Permission to return to quarters, sir." Reed tried to speak. The words caught in his throat. Then finally, "Phantom." Every soldier on the range stood frozen. Morrison's face went pale, his jaw slack. Reed took a step forward, his voice breaking. "You saved my life." No one moved. The cold night, once filled with laughter, was now heavy with something else. Respect, disbelief, guilt. Reed straightened, and then, to everyone's astonishment, the colonel dropped to one knee. "I called you dead weight," he said softly, "but I owe you everything." The floodlights hummed, a single moth circling the glare, as the men who had mocked her stood in absolute silence. And Harper Mitchell, phantom of Ghost Unit 17, stood without expression, her sleeve concealing the scars of a life they would never understand. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And that night at Fort Campbell, a legend quietly came back to life. For a long time, no one spoke. The sound of the night, the crickets, the distant hum of the floodlights, felt too loud against the sudden quiet. 20 hardened operators stood still, their rifles hanging forgotten at their sides. Colonel Reed remained on one knee, his eyes locked on the woman they'd all mocked only minutes ago. "You saved my life," he said again, his voice rough, heavy with memory. Harper didn't move. Her face was unreadable, as if she'd trained herself to erase emotion long ago. "Sir," she said quietly, "permission to return to quarters." But Reed wasn't hearing procedure anymore. His mind was back in Afghanistan, in that inferno of fire, smoke, and broken bodies. He saw it again, the convoy ambushed in the narrow valley, the Humvee flipped and burning, the screams, the certainty that no one was getting out alive. And then a voice through the chaos, calm, focused. "Phantom Actual, I've got you, hold still." Small hands dragging him through glass and blood. A figure moving through the flames, refusing to stop, refusing to die. And now she stood in front of him, alive, trembling from exhaustion but unbroken. Reed's voice cracked. "I called you dead weight, you carried me out of that fire." Morrison took a step backward as if struck. "Sir, what is this? What's that tattoo? What's happening?" William's voice carried the weight of 1,000 buried memories. "Ghost Unit 17, he said quietly. "A Black Ops team that officially never existed. Kandahar Province, Operation Hellfire." Torres frowned, his bravado gone. That's the ambush we studied in tactics training, the one where everyone died." "Everyone," Williams repeated, "except one." All eyes turned back to Harper. The woman who had just shattered their arrogance didn't look like a legend. She stood straight, her rifle slung, her left arm still slightly limp. There was no pride in her eyes, only a quiet exhaustion, the kind that comes from carrying the weight of ghosts. Reed slowly rose to his feet, his posture uncertain. "It was you," he whispered. "You were Phantom." Harper said nothing. Elena's voice was a whisper. "You're the one from the Hellfire ambush, the one who pulled 6 men out under fire." Harper's eyes flickered to her, soft for the first time that night. "That mission is classified." William stepped closer, shaking his head. "Not anymore." He turned to Reed, his voice low but firm. "Sir, you should know Phantom's actions that night were buried. The reports said air support got them out, but the truth is she carried them out herself, with that damaged arm." Reed looked like a man seeing a ghost in daylight. "I remember your voice," he said. "When I was trapped, I thought you died out there." Harper's eyes dropped to the ground. "I almost did." No one moved. Finally, Reed took one shaky step forward, then another, and then something no one had ever seen from him. He saluted. The gesture was crisp, perfect, and trembling at the same time. The colonel's voice carried across the range. "Specialist Harper Mitchell, Ghost Unit 17, I owe you my life. and 6 families owe you theirs." The SEALs stared, disbelief carved into every face. Morrison's throat bobbed. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, "what have we done?" The shame hit all of them like a physical wave. The laughter, the insults, the months of casual cruelty, they echoed back now, sounding small and cowardly in the face of the truth. Harper finally turned, her expression steady but distant. "You did your job, Colonel," she said softly. "You evaluated a soldier based on performance. That's what a commander should do." Reed shook his head, voice breaking. "Don't let us off the hook that easily. We judged you without knowing. We mocked what we didn't understand." "Understanding wasn't required," Harper replied. "Performance was." Her calmness only deepened the guilt hanging in the air. Alina stepped forward, her hands trembling. "You saved people you didn't even know, and she couldn't finish the sentence." Reed turned to the others, his face hard again, but this time not with anger. "Attention," he barked. The instinct kicked in instantly. Every operator snapped to attention. Present arms. 20 rifles lifted in perfect unison, barrels angled skyward in salute. The sound of synchronized movement cut through the silence like thunder. Harper took a small step back, shaking her head. "Sir, this isn't necessary." "It's an order," Reed said, voice steady now. "You will stand there and you will accept the respect you earned." One by one, more soldiers arrived, drawn by the commotion, whispers spreading fast. "Phantoms here, the ghosts real." Rangers, Green Berets, support staff, all gathering, all realizing who she was. And then silence again. A sea of soldiers standing at attention beneath the cold floodlights, saluting one woman. Harper stood motionless, unsure whether to be proud or horrified. This wasn't what she wanted, not fame, not exposure, just quiet service. She'd spent years hiding in plain sight, working logistics, counting supplies, fixing broken systems, because it was the only way she knew how to honor the dead without becoming one of them. Now every secret she'd guarded was out. Morrison stepped out of formation, his voice shaking. "Specialist Mitchell, Phantom, there's no apology big enough for how we treated you." Harper's expression softened slightly. "You treated me like any other soldier who couldn't meet standards," she said. "That's what I wanted." "But you're not just any soldier," Morrison said. "I'm a supply specialist with nerve damage," Harper interrupted quietly. "That's all you knew. That's all you needed to know." Torres stepped forward next. If we'd known about your injuries, about what you did, we could have helped." "You would have treated me differently," Harper said, looking at him. "Given me pity instead of respect, easy duty instead of expectations. My team died as warriors. The least I can do is live as one." Her words hung in the cold air like frost. Williams, who'd remained silent through it all, stepped closer. "She's right. The past is classified for a reason. Those missions, their outcomes, they exist in shadows for a purpose. The kind of sacrifice she made doesn't come with medals. It comes with silence." Reed straightened, his composure returning. "Then from this moment," he said, voice carrying across the range, "Specialist Mitchell is the primary marksmanship instructor for all special operations personnel at Fort Campbell." He looked at the crowd. "Any objections?" "Sir, no, sir," the response thundered back. Harper blinked, startled. "Sir, that's not necessary." "It's earned," Reed cut in firmly. Alina moved forward then, forgetting rank, protocol, everything, and wrapped her arms around Harper. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing me what real strength looks like." The embrace lasted only a moment before Harper gently pulled away. "Strength looks different for everyone," she said. "Sometimes it's standing up, sometimes it's staying silent." The soldiers slowly lowered their rifles, the crowd dispersing one by one, leaving behind a silence that felt reverent. But Harper didn't leave. She stood in the fading light of the range, watching her breath mist in the air. For the first time in years, She felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel, seen. William stepped beside her. "You know," he said quietly, "I recognized you the day you arrived." Harper turned. "You did?" He nodded. "I was there in Kandahar. Different unit, but I saw the aftermath. Saw the blood trail you left dragging men to safety. I knew the second I saw how you moved. I kept quiet because I figured you had your reasons." "I did," Harper said. "And now?" She exhaled slowly. "Now I don't know." William studied her face. "Then let me tell you something, Mitchell. Heroes don't always wear capes or medals. Sometimes they wear warehouse badges and limp when it rains. You earned your peace. Don't let anyone take it from you." She nodded once. "Thank you, Master Chief." When she turned to leave, Reed's voice stopped her. "Mitchell," he said, "tomorrow 600, officers' conference room. We need to discuss your future." "Yes, sir," she replied, though her tone carried quiet resignation. As she walked away, her gait slightly uneven, Reed watched her go, the woman who'd saved his life and then let him humiliate her without protest. Williams shook his head slowly. "You know what gets me," he said. "She didn't want recognition, she wanted to serve." Reed's jaw clenched. "Then the least we can do is make sure she can." That night, long after the crowd dispersed, why did silence feel heavier than applause? The salute had ended hours ago, yet Harper Mitchell could still feel it, the soundless weight of 20 raised hands, 20 faces stripped of pride and filled with something deeper. Respect, shame, awe. Now, in the quiet hum of the base medical wing, that moment played back in fragments. The sterile smell of disinfectant, the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights, the rhythmic tick of the nerve conduction monitor beside her. "Only 30% function in your left arm," the doctor said softly, studying the digital chart. "Frankly, it's a miracle you can even hold a weapon." Harper's gaze didn't leave the screen. The green lines danced with every faint pulse her nerves managed to send. "I don't need miracles, doctor," she said quietly. "Just enough to teach." The doctor blinked. "Teach." Harper slid off the exam table, fastening her sleeve again. "Colonel Reed thinks I should be Fort Campbell's new marksmanship instructor." There was a pause. "After what you did tonight, I think you could be anything you want." Harper smiled faintly. "That's the problem. I don't want anything, just to serve." She left before the doctor could answer. Outside, dawn was breaking, gray lights spilling over the base like forgiveness. Soldiers were already gathering for morning drills, the news spreading faster than any official memo. "Phantom's real. She's here." Everywhere Harper walked, conversations stopped. Some stared, others saluted quietly. It was uncomfortable, the kind of attention she'd spent years avoiding. Elena caught up to her near the motor pool, out of breath but smiling. "They're saying the Pentagon called twice last night. Something about commendations, press coverage." "No," Harper cut her off. "But specialist." "No," she said again, softer this time. "That's not what ghosts do." Elena looked confused. "Ghosts?" Harper met her gaze. "The fallen, the ones who made me what I am. Recognition belongs to them, not to me." The young private fell silent. She didn't fully understand yet, but she would, in time. By mid-morning, the firing range had been cleared and reset for a new purpose. Where once there had been laughter and derision, now there was discipline, tight formations, eyes forward, posture perfect. Colonel Reed stood at the edge of the range, arms crossed. He looked older somehow, as if the night had stripped years from his composure. When Harper arrived, the soldiers snapped to attention. Reed nodded once. "Specialist Mitchell," he said formally, "as of 900 hours, you are the primary marksmanship instructor for all special operations personnel assigned to this base." There was a pause, a long still silence. "Any objections?" he barked. "Sir, no, sir," the group thundered in unison. Reed turned back to her, eyes red-rimmed but steady. "You've earned this, Phantom." She flinched slightly at the name. "Please, sir, Harper's fine." "Not to me," Reed said quietly. "Never again." He turned sharply and walked off before emotion could betray him. The weeks that followed transformed Fort Campbell in quiet, invisible ways. At first, the soldiers came to her classes out of obligation, curiosity, or guilt. But soon, it became something else. They came to learn. Harper didn't lecture. She didn't bark orders. Her style was calm, deliberate, rooted in experience. She taught not just how to shoot, but how to think, how to breathe through pain, how to fight through fear, how to respect the weapon and themselves. "Marksmanship isn't about dominance," she told them during one session. "It's about understanding. The rifle doesn't care about your rank or your ego. It mirrors your state of mind. If your thoughts are cluttered, your aim will drift. If your pride gets in the way, you'll pull early." The soldiers listened differently now. Even Morrison, the same man who once called her dead weight, now showed up early every morning, cleaning rifles before class began. His usual swagger was gone, replaced with something quieter. Humility. During one training session, he paused mid-aim, lowering his weapon. "Specialist, I still don't understand how you can look at us after what we did, after what I said." Harper adjusted his stance, her hand steady on his shoulder. "You treated me like I appeared," she said. "Weak. That's what any soldier would have done. You were maintaining standards." He frowned. "We were bullies." "Yes," Harper said simply, "and now you're better." Morrison stared at her, speechless. Then finally, "You really believe that?" "I have to," she said softly. "Otherwise none of it means anything." When he fired again, his shot hit center mass at 600 meters. Harper's nod of approval said more than any medal could. Word spread beyond the base. Officers from other installations requested to observe her methods. Veterans came just to shake her hand. Pentagon officials called again, 3 times this time. Reed blocked every request. When a public affairs officer suggested turning her story into a recruitment campaign, the colonel's response was short and unprintable. "She's not your headline," he'd said. "She's our teacher." Harper never sought attention, but she couldn't stop the whispers. Phantoms teaching again. The ghost came back to life. At night, when the range emptied, she would return to the supply warehouse. The same worn clipboard, the same quiet shelves. Inventory, organization, order. It grounded her. Sometimes, when no one was watching, she'd pause, her hand resting over the tattoo beneath her sleeve. 11 names whispered through her mind, each one a memory, a voice, a laugh she'd never hear again. That was how she honored them, not with ceremonies or speeches, but with accuracy, precision, discipline. Every round that hit its mark was a tribute. Every soldier she trained was another chance to make sure no one died the way they did. 3 months passed, and with time came transformation. The soldiers she once trained now trained others. Elena began cross-training with combat medics. Torres led communications workshops. Morrison became Harper's assistant instructor. Even Reed had changed. The old harshness had softened into something closer to stewardship. He'd been humbled, and he wore it like a badge of honor. One evening, as the sun bled gold over the range, Reed found her cleaning rifles alone. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to think strength was noise, orders, shouting, commands. But watching you, I realized strength can be silence too." Harper smiled faintly. "Silence isn't weakness, sir. It's just knowing when not to waste words." He chuckled, shaking his head. "You're dangerous, Mitchell. You make people think." She holstered the freshly cleaned rifle. "Thinking saves lives, Colonel. Pride doesn't." Reed looked at her for a long moment, then said something she didn't expect. "They told me you could be reinstated. Full active duty. Command-level clearance. You've got allies in D.C." Harper froze. "I'm not going back." "Why not?" She hesitated, eyes drifting toward the distant tree line. Because the battlefield doesn't need me anymore. The classroom does. Reed nodded slowly. Then that's where you'll stay. That night the warehouse was quiet again. The hum of old fluorescent lights, the soft rustle of paperwork. Alina found her there, hunched over an inventory list. You don't have to do this every night, Alina said. We can handle it. Harper looked up. My team always finished their missions. Alina tilted her head, even the small ones. Especially the small ones. They worked side by side until midnight, checking shipments and labeling gear. Every box they packed meant another soldier would have what they needed to come home safe. Unglamorous work, but it mattered. When they finally finished, Harper leaned against a crate, exhaustion softening her expression. Do you ever stop? Alina asked, half teasing. Harper's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. If I stop, I start remembering. Remembering's not bad, Alina said gently. Sometimes it's everything, Harper murmured, and sometimes it's too much. She didn't elaborate, she didn't have to. Alina nodded quietly, understanding more than words could say. As they turned off the lights, the warehouse sank into darkness, rows of silent equipment gleaming faintly in the dim emergency glow. To anyone else, it looked ordinary. To Harper Mitchell, it was sacred ground. Every crate, every round, every name she'd whispered under her breath while counting supplies. Each one a promise, never again. Outside, the wind carried the faint echo of cadence calls from soldiers still training under floodlights. Harper watched them through the window, strong, focused, unified. A part of her wondered if this peace would last, if she'd ever truly outrun the shadow of the past. Then she remembered her own words to Morrison. Anger is weight. I'm already carrying enough. She turned away from the window, exhaled slowly, and let the ghosts rest. For tonight, at least. Strength isn't measured by who stands tallest, she thought as she closed the door behind her. It's measured by who stands back up. And though the world would never know her name, those who served beside her would remember. Not the legend. Not the myth. Just the woman who refused to give up. Why did the quiet always come before the storm? The base was still half asleep when the first phone call came. Harper was in the firing range, alone as usual. Dawn lights spilled across the concrete, glinting off spent casings. The smell of oil and powder hung in the air, a scent she found comforting in ways she couldn't explain. She just finished cleaning her rifle when the old landline on her desk began to ring. A sound she hadn't heard in months. She froze. No one called that line, not anymore. The label printed above it read Secure Channel, JSOC access only. The red light blinked once, then twice, then steady. Harper stared at it for a long moment, then picked up the receiver. Mitchell. The voice on the other end was filtered, electronic, but unmistakably human beneath the distortion. Phantom, we have a situation. The name hit her like a pulse of electricity. No one called her that anymore. You've got the wrong line, Harper said evenly. Phantom doesn't exist. Not officially, the voice replied, but unofficially your country needs you. Silence stretched between them. Outside she could hear the faint echo of morning drills, boots hitting ground, sergeants shouting cadence. Report comes through in 2 minutes, the voice continued. Packet arriving by secure courier, priority alpha, read it alone. Then the line went dead. Harper stood still, receiver still pressed to her ear, the dial tone humming like a distant heartbeat. 2 minutes later, a knock came at her door. A young MP stood there, stiff as a statue, holding a sealed red folder stamped top secret, EYES only. Ma'am, he said, saluting. She returned the gesture automatically, thank you. The MP nodded and left without a word. Harper set the folder on her desk. She didn't open it right away. The seal glared back at her, a single classified emblem she hadn't seen since the day her unit died. For a moment, she wasn't in Kentucky anymore. She was in Kandahar again, sand burning her lungs, gunfire echoing through the hills, her team's voices screaming over the comms. She closed her eyes, counted to 3, breathed. Then she broke the seal. The contents were sparse: satellite photos and operation summary, a single name underlined twice. SGT, David Chen, Ghost Unit 15. Harper's stomach dropped. Chen. Her mentor, the man who taught her everything she knew about ghost warfare, moving unseen, thinking asymmetrically, surviving the impossible. According to the file, he'd been operating deep undercover in eastern Syria for 7 years. Intelligence gathering, tracking bioweapons, saving lives without anyone knowing he existed. Now he was trapped. His last transmission, compromised, no extraction possible. The map showed the building, a small concrete structure hemmed in by enemy units. Surrounding roads were redlined. Every modeled rescue attempt had failed. Harper exhaled slowly, her pulse steadying. Of course they'd call her. Ghost saves ghost. Colonel Reed found her in his office an hour later, standing by the window, the folder clutched in her hand. "Mitchell," he said carefully, "I just got word from Joint Special Operations Command. They already called me," she interrupted. Reed studied her face, the same way a commander studies a live grenade, aware it could go off at any second. "They want you to plan it. They want me to lead it." Reed blinked. "You're not fit for fieldwork, Harper. Your arm still shoots at 98% accuracy," she said. "Still works, still leads." He sighed, rubbing his temple. "No one would blame you for saying no. You've given enough." She turned to face him fully. "He's my mentor, Colonel, my friend. If I don't go, he dies alone." That stopped him. He'd seen the haunted look in her eyes before, the kind soldiers got when the past refused to stay buried. "Then you're going," he said finally, "but not alone." The next few hours were a blur of movement. Harper walked through the base like a storm no one could see coming. Her students, Morrison, Elena, Jackson, Tors, were already waiting outside the command center when she arrived. Each one geared up, each face calm but determined. "You already know," Harper said quietly. Morrison nodded. "Word travels fast." "Volunteers only," Harper said. "No orders, no promotions, no recognition." "Good," Tors said with a grin. "We're not in it for that." Harper looked at them one by one. Once, these same soldiers had mocked her. Now they stood ready to follow her into the fire. "Then listen carefully," she said. "Ghost operations don't fight the enemy's war. We don't match strength with strength. We use their expectations against them." She spread out the satellite photos on the table. The building, the perimeter, the escape routes, or what little there were. "They're expecting a military rescue," she said. "Helicopters, firefights, explosions will give them the opposite." Morrison frowned. "What's the opposite of a rescue?" Harper smiled faintly. "An illusion." 12 hours later, a C-17 transport plane cut through the upper atmosphere, lights dimmed, passengers silent. Inside, Harper's team sat strapped in half soldiers, half shadows. Their mission: move unseen. Their cover: humanitarian aid workers responding to a fake cholera outbreak. Elena would play the medic. Morrison and Jackson, her security escorts. Tors, the comms tech. And Harper would be invisible. As the engines droned, she checked her rifle one last time. Her left hand trembled faintly, but she ignored it. Pain was just another factor to measure. Morrison broke the silence. "So this is what it's like, ghost work." Harper nodded. "This is the easy part, fear's quiet before the drop." He chuckled nervously. "And after?" "After," she said, locking her weapon, "you adapt or you die." The aircraft touched down on a dimly lit airstrip just inside friendly territory. From there, they transferred into civilian trucks, disguised beneath faded tarps marked with aid organization logos. The drive through the borderlands was long and tense. Convoys of real humanitarian workers passed them in the opposite direction. Doctors, volunteers, ordinary people trying to save lives in the middle of chaos. Harper admired them quietly. The real heroes never carried rifles. When they reached the outskirts of the target city, she gathered the team. "Remember," she said, "we're not heroes, we're not soldiers, we're nobody. And nobody is exactly what they won't see coming." The mission unfolded like a carefully choreographed illusion. While U.S. forces launched a highly visible reconnaissance, Operation 20 miles south, Harper's team slipped through checkpoints using forged IDs and Alina's medical credentials. They reached the safe house just as dawn broke over the horizon, a fractured skyline of ruined concrete and smoke. Through a cracked wall, Harper could see movement, hostile patrols circling the perimeter, 20 men, maybe more. Tor's voice came over the comms. "No way we can fight through that." "We won't," Harper said. "Look." She traced her finger along a digital map on her tablet, pointing to a line beneath the streets. Ancient sewer tunnels, forgotten by modern maps but still visible in pre-war city records. Morrison squinted. "You're kidding, that's suicide." "No," Harper said, "that's ghost work." The tunnels were pitch black, the air thick with decay. Each step echoed through narrow corridors, boots splashing through ankle-deep water. Harper led the way, one hand on the wall, the other gripping her rifle. Her damaged arm burned with every movement, but she didn't slow down. After what felt like hours, they reached a rusted ladder leading up to a basement door. Harper gestured silently. Morrison went first, breaching low and clean. Inside, they found him. Sergeant David Chen. He was gaunt, bleeding, but alive. When he looked up and saw Harper, his expression shifted from disbelief to quiet awe. "Phantom." "Ghosts usually are," she said softly, kneeling beside him. He tried to stand but winced. "They told me you were dead." "Not dead," Harper said, "just retired." Chen laughed weakly. "I don't believe in retirement." "Neither do I," she said. "Can you move?" "Slowly, but there are 20 of them upstairs, maybe more outside." Harper's eyes glinted. "Good. That means they're all looking the wrong way." The extraction played out like a whisper through fire. Using the tunnels, the team moved Chen through side streets while the decoy operation drew enemy eyes elsewhere. They never fired a shot, never left a trace. By the time the enemy realized their target was gone, Harper's convoy had already crossed into friendly airspace. As the C-17 lifted off from the tarmac, Morrison slumped in his seat, adrenaline giving way to disbelief. "Is it always like that?" he asked quietly. "The fear, the clarity." Harper smiled faintly. "Every time, and the day it stops feeling like that is the day you stop being effective." Alina was treating Chen's wounds across the aisle. The older soldier watched Harper in silence. "You shouldn't have come for me," he said finally. "You had peace." Harper shook her head. "Peace isn't freedom, Sergeant. It's just a quieter kind of cage." Chen's gaze softened. "You always were the stubborn one." She smiled faintly. "Takes one to know one." They landed back at Fort Campbell before sunrise. No welcome party, no press, no ceremony. General Hayes was waiting near the hangar, tall, commanding, her stars catching the first morning light. Harper saluted. Hayes nodded once. "Outstanding work, exactly what I expected from Phantom." Harper's expression didn't change. "Don't call again, General. This was the last time." "Are you sure?" Hayes asked. "Your kind of ghost doesn't fade easy." Harper looked past her, at her students, at Chen being carried toward the med bay, at the first streaks of dawn over the airfield. "My ghosts are at peace now," she said. "My debt's paid." Hayes studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Understood. As the general walked away, Harper turned toward her team. They were quiet, exhausted, yet changed. The mission had done what training never could. It had bound them together through shared danger. Harper holstered her weapon and gave a small nod. Get some rest. You've earned it. Morrison hesitated. What about you? She looked toward the rising sun. I'll rest when they stop calling. But even as she said it, she knew the truth. They would call again. They always did. Because ghosts don't disappear. They just wait for the next darkness that needs haunting. How long could peace last before the past came knocking again? Weeks had passed since the mission in Syria. Fort Campbell moved on, as military bases always did, training cycles, logistics reports, new recruits arriving with bright eyes and clean uniforms. To anyone watching from the outside, Specialist Harper Mitchell was the same as before, quiet, methodical, unshakable. But inside, something had shifted. She'd gone back to her warehouse, to her rifles, to her routines. Every morning she taught. Every night she counted. It was what she did best, keep order in a world built on chaos. But sometimes, when the range went quiet and the smell of gunpowder hung in the still air, the ghosts crept back in. She'd see Chen's face pale, exhausted but alive. She'd hear the whisper of the calm line from that day. Phantom, we have a situation. She hadn't told anyone how close it had been, how her damaged arm had nearly failed at the worst possible moment, how she felt the sharp, familiar sting of helplessness, the reminder that her body was no longer what it once was. That kind of truth didn't belong in reports. It belonged in silence. One afternoon, she stood in the range tower watching Morrison run drills for the new recruits. He moved with sharp, efficient precision, no wasted words, no arrogance, just focus. Good group, Reed said beside her. His tone had changed since that night months ago, less bark, more weight. They'll do, Harper said. He nodded slowly. You built something here, Mitchell, something that'll outlast both of us. Harper didn't answer. She watched Morrison correct a recruit's grip, gently, patiently. The same patience she'd taught him. You ever think about taking a commission? Reed asked. You've got leadership in your blood. I had command once, Harper said quietly. Didn't end well. Reed studied her face. You mean Ghost 17. She gave a faint smile. I mean war. That night the warehouse was quiet again. Only the hum of the lights and the soft clink of metal as she logged equipment. The rhythm calmed her, numbers, weights, serials. Facts didn't argue. Facts didn't bleed. Alina entered quietly, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. You'll burn out at this rate. Harper smiled without looking up. Can't burn out if you never stop burning. That's not comforting, Alina said with a small laugh, setting 1 mug beside her. They worked together for a while in silence. It had become their ritual, inventory nights. No ranks, no protocol, just 2 women trying to make sense of a world built on orders and ghosts. Do you ever think you'll leave? Alina asked suddenly. Harper paused, pencil hovering above the clipboard. Leave what? The base, the army, all of this. Harper thought for a moment. No, I think this is where I belong. Even after everything. Especially after everything. Alina nodded, understanding something deeper she couldn't put into words. Before she could respond, the door creaked open. Harper didn't look up. Night guards often made rounds this late. But the voice that followed froze her in place. Working late again, Mitchell. Her hand tightened around the pencil until it snapped. No. That voice. It couldn't be. Slowly she turned. The man in the doorway was taller than she remembered, his face marked by years of rough survival. A jagged scar crossed his cheek, catching the warehouse light. Major Ryan Cole. Her second in command from Ghost Unit 17. The man whose body, was never recovered. The one she'd mourned. Her throat tightened. "You're dead." Cole stepped forward, his eyes unreadable. "That's what everyone thought. You saw the building collapse, figured nobody made it out. I saw you buried under the debris." He shrugged. "Guess ghosts have a way of surviving the impossible." Alina's mug slipped from her hands, shattering across the floor. She looked between them, confused. You know him." Harper's voice was barely above a whisper. "He was my team leader, my friend." Cole's gaze softened for a second, then hardened again. "Friend? Yeah, once." Something in his tone made Harper's chest tighten. "Where have you been?" she asked carefully. "Prison," he said flatly. "Escaped. Spent 3 years crawling through the cracks of the world. Then I came home and found out my unit was written off. Dead and buried. Forgotten." "Never forgotten," Harper said fiercely. "I carry them every day." "With what?" he shot back. "Inventory logs, supply requests, teaching recruits who will never know the truth about what we did." Alina took a small step back. The air felt charged, dangerous. "Ryan," Harper said softly, "you need help, medical, psychological." "Help," he laughed, the sound brittle and hollow. "I don't need therapy, I need justice." He dropped a thick folder onto her desk. Papers spilled out, documents, photos, blacked-out reports. Harper frowned. "What is this?" "Everything they buried. Names, missions, the lies they told to protect their stars and promotions." "You can't have this," Harper said. "It's classified." Cole's eyes burned. "You mean covered up? Our team died because of these people, Harper, and they moved on like nothing happened. I'm done hiding. I'm done being their ghost." Her stomach turned cold. "You're going to expose it." "I already am," he said. "Tomorrow morning the first files go public, unless you help me stop them first." She stared at him, disbelief flashing to anger. "Stop who, Ryan? The people you swore to protect." "The system that used us up and threw us away." His voice cracked, emotion bleeding through. "Don't you see? They killed our unit, then erased us. I'm not letting that stand." Harper took a slow breath, stepping closer. "And what happens when you release this? How many people die because of the secrets you'll expose? Intel assets, covert agents still in the field." He hesitated, just a flicker, but enough. "They're not innocent," he said weakly. "No," she said, "but some are." For a moment the warehouse felt impossibly small. 2 soldiers, one still clinging to duty, one devoured by betrayal. "Ryan," she said softly, "we both lost everything, but this isn't justice, it's revenge." His hand trembled slightly as he picked up one of the documents. "Revenge is the only thing that kept me alive." "Then let it go," she whispered. "You made it home, that's enough." He slammed the papers down. "It's not enough. Not for the 11 we left behind, not for me." Her chest tightened at the mention of them, her team, the ghosts she carried like scars. She looked at him for a long time, searching for the man she'd once followed into battle. "Ryan," she said finally, "what do you want from me?" He stared at her, eyes tired, furious, pleading. "Join me. Help me bring the truth into the light, or stay here pretending none of it matters." The silence that followed stretched like wire between them. Harper looked down at the folder. Dozens of redacted pages, enough to destroy careers, expose missions, unravel everything she'd spent her life believing in. And yet she understood him. The rage, the loneliness, the need for meaning after so much loss. "You think this will bring them peace," she said quietly. "It won't. It'll only make more ghosts." Cole's expression twisted. "Then you really are gone." She straightened, calm returning like armor. "No, I just learned that some battles are fought by living better, not by burning everything down." He stared at her, trembling. The war inside him was visible now, soldier versus survivor. "Don't make me your enemy," Harper said softly. "You're not alone anymore. Stay, heal. Help me teach the next generation not to repeat our mistakes." "I can't," he whispered. "That man died in Kandahar." "So did the woman I was," she said. "But we're still breathing, Ryan. That has to count for something." The folder sat between them like a live explosive. Cole picked it up slowly, staring at it, then walked to the industrial shredder in the corner. For a moment, Harper held her breath. Then, without another word, he fed the papers in. Page after page disappeared, devoured by the machine. The sound was harsh, final, cleansing. When it was done, Cole turned to her. His voice was barely a whisper. "Now what?" Harper rolled down her sleeve, covering the tattoo that had defined too much of her life. "Now you meet my students. They're stubborn, loud, and think they know everything." A faint, broken smile ghosted across his face. "Remind you of anyone?" She laughed softly. "Yeah, you." By morning, the rumor had spread quietly across base, a stranger in the warehouse, someone from her past. No one asked questions. Soldiers knew when to let ghosts stay ghosts. As the sun rose over Fort Campbell, Harper and Cole walked side by side toward the range. Not to vanish into the shadows again, but to face something harder. Living, teaching, remembering. Behind them, the shredded papers lay in a bin, reduced to fragments no one would ever read. For once, that felt right. Because some truths weren't meant to burn. They were meant to heal. And as the morning light touched the field, Harper realized the ghosts of Ghost Unit 17 weren't haunting her anymore. They were guiding her. Why did survival feel heavier than death? The sun was rising over Fort Campbell, painting the sky in streaks of pale orange and gold. The range stretched silent before them, the kind of stillness that comes only after storms, when the world hasn't yet decided if it's safe to breathe again. Harper Mitchell stood beside Major Ryan Cole, both of them ghosts trying to remember how to be human again. It had been 3 days since the night in the warehouse. 3 days since Cole fed years of secrets into a shredder and watched his fury dissolve into ash. He hadn't spoken much since. Harper didn't press. Some wounds needed silence more than words. At 600, the first recruits filed onto the range. Morrison led them with steady authority, his voice sharp but measured. Elena followed, medical kit slung over her shoulder, smiling at the sight of Harper already waiting. Cole stood a few paces behind, hands in his pockets, posture casual but alert. He looked out of place among the crisp uniforms, hair too long, scars too visible. But the soldiers didn't question it. Something about his presence radiated quiet command. "Morning, Specialist," Morrison greeted, snapping a salute. "We're ready for instruction." "Not today," Harper said. "Today you're getting something better." She turned toward Cole. "This is Major Ryan Cole, former commanding officer, Ghost Unit 17. A ripple of surprise moved through the group. They all knew the name, the legend, the myth. No one had expected him to be real. Cole gave a small nod, at ease. The soldiers relaxed, but their eyes stayed locked on him. Harper gestured toward the firing line. "Major Cole's going to help with advanced marksmanship, but pay attention to how he moves, not just what he shoots." Cole raised a brow. "That sounds dangerously like a compliment." "Don't get used to it," she said, almost smiling. He stepped forward, lifted a rifle from the rack, and checked the chamber with practiced ease. His movements were precise but unhurried, a man who'd done this 1,000 times and no longer needed to prove it. "Lesson 1, he said, voice low but firm. "Weapons don't win fights, awareness does." He pointed to his head. "This is your most powerful weapon. Use it before you pull a trigger." The recruits watched, captivated. Cole fired once. The bullet struck dead center. "Lesson 2, he continued, lowering the rifle. "If you aim with fear, you'll always miss." The shot echoed through the air, rolling across the range like a heartbeat. Harper studied him quietly. The soldier she'd once followed into chaos was still there, scarred, older, slower maybe, but intact. He caught her looking. "What?" "Just thinking," she said. "Dangerous habit. Comes with age." They shared a faint smile. For the first time since he'd walked back into her life, she saw something resembling peace in his eyes. Later that day, the recruits broke for lunch. Harper sat beneath the awning of the range tower, sipping black coffee, her gaze distant. Cole joined her, dropping heavily into the chair beside her. "Your students are good," he said. "They're better than they think. You always did have a thing for underdogs." She smirked. "Says the man who used to pick the smallest soldier for point duty just to prove a lesson." He laughed quietly, shaking his head. "You remember that?" "I remember everything," she said softly. For a long while, they said nothing. The silence between them wasn't tense anymore, just familiar, like an old scar that no longer hurt to touch. Finally, Cole spoke again. "I keep thinking about that night, the ambush, the blast, the way everything went dark." Harper didn't interrupt. "I used to think dying was the worst thing that could happen," he continued. "Turns out living with what happened is harder." Harper nodded slowly. "Because the world keeps moving like it didn't happen." "Exactly." He looked at her, eyes sharp but tired. "How do you do it? How do you live with ghosts?" She set her cup down. "I don't, I live for them." He frowned slightly. "There's a difference." "Yes," she said. "Living with ghosts means letting them weigh you down. Living for them means carrying them forward." Cole leaned back, considering that. "You always did find poetry in pain." Harper gave a faint smile. "Pain's the only honest teacher we get." Over the next few weeks, Cole began helping with training sessions regularly. He didn't talk much, but when he did, every word mattered. He showed Morrison how to shoot from cover, using angles most soldiers never considered. He taught Alina how to stabilize her aim under pressure, using breath control instead of brute strength. He even worked with Tors on counter-surveillance drills, making him laugh for. How do you honor ghosts without becoming one yourself? That question lived with Harper every morning now. In the way she walked the range before sunrise. In the way she spoke to new recruits, not as a commander, not as a legend, but as someone who had once been broken and found a way to keep standing. The world outside Fort Campbell kept moving, new missions, new wars, new headlines. But here in this small patch of Tennessee soil, something sacred was happening. A rebirth. Harper and Cole trained together again. Not as Phantom and her second-in-command. Not as soldiers haunted by loss. But as two survivors learning how to live after survival. At first it was awkward. Cole's instincts were sharp but scarred. He still moved like a man expecting an ambush, still flinched at sudden sounds. Harper understood. The body always remembered. But she refused to let him fade. During one session, she caught him staring at the recruits on the firing line, eyes distant, jaw tight. "You see them as replacements?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, I see them as reminders. Every one of them thinks they're invincible, just like we did." Harper adjusted the sling on her rifle. "Then teach them something we never learned, that strength doesn't mean invincibility. It means endurance." Cole gave a small, rueful smile. "You always were the poet." "Not a poet," she said, "just a survivor with good memory." By the end of that month, recruits spoke about them the way soldiers tell stories around campfires, part truth, part myth. The ghosts of Campbell. The quiet woman with a scar on her arm, and the soldier who came back from the dead. They didn't mind the stories. Let them spread. If myths could inspire better soldiers, let the legends grow. But Harper's lessons were never about war. They were about what came after. In one class, she told her students, "Every shot you fire echoes, not just in the field but in who you become. You'll remember the sound long after the mission ends. Make sure it's a sound you can live with." The room had gone utterly still. Even Morrison had looked shaken, understanding the weight in her words. After class, Alina approached. "You sound different these days, softer." Harper smiled faintly. "I'm not softer, I'm just done shouting at ghosts." Alina tilted her head. "And Major Cole?" Harper's gaze drifted toward the window where he was supervising recruits. "He's learning the same thing, slowly." Alina nodded. "He looks lighter, like he finally put something down." "He did," Harper said quietly. "Vengeance." That evening, Harper sat in the warehouse again, her sanctuary of order and silence. Cole joined her, a cup of black coffee in hand. "Never thought I'd find peace in a building full of spare parts," he said, leaning against a crate. Harper smiled. "These parts keep people alive, there's peace in that." He studied her for a long time. "You ever wonder why we survived? Out of everyone, why us?" "Every day," she said softly. "But I stopped looking for an answer. Survival isn't a question, it's an assignment." "An assignment." She met his eyes. "We carry what they can't, their lessons, their failures, their courage. That's our duty now." Cole looked down at his cup. "So that's what this is for you, living for them." "No," Harper said, voice steady. "Living because of them." He nodded slowly. "That's a better way to put it." They stood there in silence for a while, two ghosts, finally learning how to live among the living. As weeks turned into months, something remarkable began to happen. The recruits Harper once trained were becoming leaders themselves, thoughtful, disciplined, humble. Her methods spread to other bases, passed from one soldier to another like quiet scripture. No one called it phantom doctrine, but that's what it became. A philosophy of invisible strength. "Judge a soldier not by how loud they command," Morrison would say to his trainees, "but by how steady they stand when no one's watching." Those words had started with Harper. Now they belonged to everyone. Cole watched the transformation with a kind of reverent disbelief. He'd spent so long believing ghosts only haunted, never healed. Now he saw how wrong he'd been. One afternoon, he found Harper kneeling at the memorial wall near the range, her hand resting on 11 engraved names. "You still visit them?" he asked quietly. "Always," she said. "They remind me to keep teaching." He crouched beside her. "Do you ever talk to them?" "Not out loud," Harper said with a faint smile. "They already know what I'd say." Cole looked at the wall. "I used to think ghosts were just pain that wouldn't die." "They are," Harper said, "until you give that pain a purpose." That night, Harper wrote in her journal, something she hadn't done in years. The words came slow, measured, like every shot she'd ever taken. "We haunt through what we leave behind, our lessons, our mercy, our silence. Ghosts are not the dead. They are the living who remember too much and choose not to forget." She paused, then added one more line. "The only question is whether we haunt the world with our pain or with our purpose." She closed the journal gently. The next day brought a letter, old-fashioned, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a photograph, Sergeant Chin with his family, smiling, alive. On the back, a few words in familiar handwriting. "A ghost saved my life. The least I can do is live it well." Harper felt her throat tighten. She placed the photo in her drawer, next to another one, Ghost Unit 17, the 12 faces of the fallen. 12 ghosts. One survivor. Now maybe two. She locked the drawer. That evening, Cole found her at the firing range again, watching the sunset through the long shadows of the target lanes. "You thinking about them?" he asked. "Always," she said, "but not the way I used to." He waited. "I used to feel like their deaths demanded something from me," she said softly. "Like I owed them my guilt, my grief, my anger. But I think what they really wanted was for me to live enough for all of us." Cole nodded slowly. "So we keep living." Harper smiled faintly. "We keep teaching." A moment of quiet passed between them. Then the sound of recruits laughing in the distance broke it. Harper turned toward the noise, eyes soft. "That sound," she said. "That's what victory really sounds like." Cole raised an eyebrow. Laughter. "No," Harper said. "Life." Later, as the stars blinked awake above the range, Harper lingered alone. The air was cool, the field empty, but she could almost feel them, her old team. Not haunting her this time. Standing beside her. Not demanding. Just present. "Still here," she whispered to the dark. In the wind that moved across the field, she could almost hear it, not words, but the echo of their resolve. "Still here." She closed her eyes, exhaled, and smiled. For the first time in years, the ghosts were quiet. Not gone. Just at peace. And for Harper Mitchell, phantom of Ghost Unit 17, that was enough. By the end of that week, a new training motto appeared on the board outside the range. No one claimed authorship, but everyone knew where it came from. The strongest warriors are the ones who choose not to show their strength. Every recruit who passed through that gate repeated it under their breath before firing their first shot. A quiet prayer. A promise. That night in her bunk, Harper wrote her final entry for the day. "We don't get to choose whether we leave ghosts behind, only whether they inspire or destroy. I choose to haunt the world with hope." She closed the notebook and set it beside her weapon. Cole's voice came from the doorway. "You ever think we'll stop being ghosts?" She smiled faintly without turning. "No, but maybe that's not the point." He frowned. "Then what is?" She looked up, eyes reflecting the faint light. "To make sure every ghost that follows us has something worth believing in." He nodded quietly, then left her to the silence, the kind that no longer felt like absence but memory. Outside, the range lights dimmed, the world at rest. And somewhere beyond the quiet, the ghosts of Ghost Unit 17 lingered, not as shadows, but as echoes of purpose. Harper exhaled, closed her eyes, and whispered a single word. Tomorrow. Because tomorrow meant another chance to live, to teach, to honor. And that, she thought, was the only mission that ever truly mattered. What does a soldier do when the war finally ends, but the echoes do? That question lingered in Harper's mind like a whisper she couldn't quiet. Even now, months after the mission, after Ryan Cole's return, after peace began to settle like dust across Fort Campbell, she could still feel it. The rhythm of purpose, the hum of memory, the ghosts walking quietly beside her. She stopped counting the days, stopped waiting for the next phone call, the next situation. The world no longer needed Phantom. And maybe that was the point. One night she found herself back at the range alone, sitting on the cold bench with her rifle laid neatly beside her. The moonlight stretched across the floor, pale and gentle. Her hand brushed the scar on her arm, the one that used to ache every time it rained. It didn't anymore. Maybe healing wasn't about fixing what broke. Maybe it was about learning how to carry it differently. She breathed deeply, the night air cool against her skin. Cole appeared from the shadows, walking slowly, hands in his jacket pockets. "You never sleep, do you?" "Old habits," she said with a small smile. "You?" "Same," he said, sitting beside her. "Guess ghosts don't rest easy." "Maybe that's because we still have something left to do," Harper said quietly. He looked at her. "Like what?" She turned the rifle in her hands, not as a weapon, but as a relic. "Like make sure the next generation never becomes us." Over the following weeks, Harper and Cole built something new. A program unofficial at first, just late-night lessons, quiet conversations, unrecorded drills. They called it Echo Training. Not about combat, not about kill counts or medals. About clarity, awareness, responsibility. Echoes, Harper explained to her recruits one evening, are what remain when the noise fades. That's what you're training to be, the echo that lasts. They listened, really listened, in a way young soldiers rarely did. Because this wasn't just another mission briefing. It was a blueprint for who they might become after the uniform came off. Cole stood in the back, watching her speak. There was something calm in his eyes now. The storm had passed, leaving only reflection. Later, when they walked out into the night air, he said softly, "You were born to lead, Harper." She shook her head. "No, I was born to learn, and I just happened to survive long enough to teach." He smiled faintly. "You think this piece we've built will last?" She looked toward the horizon where the last trace of daylight lingered. "Maybe not, but peace was never the point. Meaning is." One morning, orders came down from command. The program was to be officially reviewed for formal adoption. It wasn't standard doctrine. It wasn't even fully authorized. But word of its impact had spread beyond Fort Campbell, quietly, through channels Harper never expected. When the general asked for her proposal, Harper wrote only one page. No charts, no slogans, just 12 lines. Teach them to think before they act, to remember before they judge, to listen before they speak, to stand before they strike, to see the human, even in the enemy, to value silence as much as courage, to know that strength without restraint is just destruction, to carry the ghosts with grace, to lead without needing applause, to fight only when it protects the living, to honor the fallen by living well, to understand that dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. She handed it in without a speech, without defense, just quiet conviction. And somehow, that silence spoke louder than any argument. Weeks later, the directive came back approved. Echo Doctrine was to be implemented across selected units. Her work, her ghosts, had finally found their voice. That night, the base gathered at the memorial field. The recruits Harper had trained stood in uniform rows under the fading light. There were no speeches, no ceremony, just names etched in metal, reflected in hundreds of silent eyes. Cole stood beside Harper. "You did it," he said softly. She shook her head. "We did it, all of us." He smiled faintly. "You really think they can change things?" Harper looked out over the faces of the young soldiers. "They already have." Cole nodded, his voice almost a whisper. "Then maybe it's time I moved on." She turned toward him. "Where will you go?" He smiled in that quiet, knowing way she remembered from years ago. "Somewhere I can still make a difference. Somewhere no one knows my name." "Ryan." He held up a hand. "You don't have to worry. I'm not running. I'm just letting the world forget me." Harper hesitated, then nodded. "That's what ghosts do best." They stood there for a moment, saying nothing. Then Cole saluted her, sharp, respectful, final. And she returned it, eyes bright under the fading sunset. When she lowered her hand, he was already walking away. No goodbye. Just the soft crunch of boots on gravel. And then he was gone. A few weeks later, Harper sat at her desk, reading letters from graduates of the program, from bases she'd never visited, soldiers she'd never met. One read: "Your doctrine saved my team from making a terrible mistake. Thank you." Another: "I never met you, but your words changed how I see command. I hope to teach others the same." She smiled, folding the letters carefully. Outside her window, the recruits were training in the morning sun, disciplined, sharp, but human. They laughed between drills, helped each other up when they stumbled. It was messy, real, beautiful. And for the first time, Harper realized that the ghosts had finally done what they came to do. They turned pain into wisdom, loss into light, silence into strength. That night, Harper visited the memorial wall one last time. She placed a single white rose beneath the names. "Rest easy," she whispered. We kept the promise. The wind moved gently through the field, not mournful, just soft. Almost like the world was breathing again. She closed her eyes, and for a heartbeat, she could feel them, her team. Jen, Ryan, all 12 of them. Not as shadows, as presence. Still here, still proud. And when she opened her eyes, she felt something she hadn't in years. Not victory, not relief. Something simpler. Freedom. The next morning, Harper turned in her badge and sidearm. Her time in uniform was over. She didn't make a speech, didn't attend her own send-off. She just left quietly, a duffel over her shoulder, sunlight on her face, ghosts at her back. Outside the gate, she paused for a long moment. Behind her, the sound of cadences echoed faintly across the field. Ahead of her, a long open road. She smiled, time to live, not remember. Then she started walking. No fanfare. No applause. Just quiet steps, steady and sure. And somewhere deep within her, beneath every scar, beneath every buried name, she felt it. The ghosts weren't following anymore. They were walking with her. Years later, soldiers would still speak her name in whispers. Recruits would still recite her lines before missions. Her words would be printed in small, faded letters on classroom walls, in briefing rooms, on memorial stones. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. They wouldn't remember her face, but they would remember the feeling she left behind. That quiet strength, that steadiness in storms. And maybe that was the point all along. Heroes fade. Legends distort. But dignity, the kind that lives in silence, in restraint, in courage without applause, that never dies. It echoes through every soldier who chooses calm over rage, mercy over pride, purpose over pain. It echoes in the stillness before dawn, in the hush of a firing range, in the unspoken bond between those who know loss and still choose to live. And in that echo, Harper Mitchell would always exist, not as a ghost, but as proof that even in a world built on noise, the quiet ones carry the loudest truths. Final line, for cinematic voiceover close. She was the woman they once mocked as dead weight, until the day the commander saluted her. And long after the salutes faded, her silence kept echoing, reminding the living what true strength sounds like.